Quickly, I'm going to start with this disclaimer. I've never played the original Resident Evil or its sequel, at least not much, although I've seen a lot of the original over the years on YouTube or via my friends playing it in the house. You may now think, why would I trust your opinion on the second game's remake then? And you may be right to think so. I'll be coming at this game from my standpoint, which is this. I love Resident Evil 4 and have played it probably 7 or so times all the way through. I enjoyed 5 for what it was, an overblown action game with some tense moments. I started but really didn't get anywhere with 6 and I completed 7 on PC. Also played Resident Evil Revelations on 3DS and Umbrella Chronicles on the Wii, which is an on-rails shooter that I can barely even remember. Other than these 6 or so games, I haven't delved into the series much and am somewhat unfamiliar with the classics, at least in their specifics. Now that you know where I'm coming from, let's get into why I think this game is pretty good. Actually, brief disclaimer number 2. My PC isn't the absolute gaming behemoth I'd like it to be, these are my specs. The RE2 remake doesn't run great on my machine. I had to pick between it looking pretty awful at times and running at 60 FPS or looking a bit nicer but playing at 30 FPS. I chose the 60 FPS pretty jaggy look because the smoother gameplay felt nicer. Just wanted to get this little issue out the way before some people start rioting in the streets because my rig didn't cost me £1,400. For these same reasons, I won't be going very deeply into the game's graphics and performance because it wouldn't really be fair for me to judge it absolutely when running on lower settings. Okay, that's the disclaimers over. There'll be gameplay and plot spoilers ahead, but for those of you that just want a brief summary of my thoughts without watching the video, I'd say it's a good game. It's quite short, it's replayable, it's got some very tense moments and a claustrophobically small inventory space that means managing your inventory is absolutely key.
Why? He's right behind you. What?
Resident Evil 2 starts with a choice, Leon or Claire. Now I know Leon from Resident Evil 4 and Claire only from various snippets of the games I've seen, and so I picked Leon's campaign to start with. It seemed to make the most sense. It took me about 6.5 hours and I died probably 15 times. During this time I had one of the worst jump scares I've ever endured and some absolutely heart-pumping moments involving lickers. We'll get onto these later. I enjoyed this playthrough, and while I found it short, it was packed with items to find and enemies to avoid.
Jesus, stay back!
Tyrant being a more threatening one as he prowls the corridors of the police station, trying to find and pound your face into dust. While the atmosphere and horror elements of the game are strongest in this early third or so, my favourite part of the whole experience was the combination of the inventory system, the map, and the collectible items littered throughout the areas. This core element of RE2 is what I think shines the most and creates the most tension. It's obvious Capcom want you to play this way too, moving around like a Roomba, searching every corner of a room for items, and hoovering them up as you go. You're not only nudged into playing this way by the constant stream of items you find, but also constantly reminded that this is what you should be doing, with the following things among others being marked on your map. Consumables, gunpowder, herbs and ammo, key items like keys or parts of a machine you'll need for a puzzle later, doors both locked or otherwise and what sort of key they'll need. All of these and more, but most importantly, rooms and whether they're clear of items or still need some searching. This is indicated by either a red or blue colour within the room. Red means there's still something to find, and blue means, yay, move on, you've seen everything. This is super handy as it means if you're looking for a key item that progresses the game, you only have to go pillaging through rooms or areas with red spaces rather than every single room in the world, just in case it's in there. This was also probably added in fairness to the player. Say you shoot every single remaining bullet out of your pistol in a frantic attempt to not get eaten at some earlier point in the game. You don't want to be running around aimlessly looking for items in random rooms when you can't even defend yourself. Ammo is scarce in this game, and having the map screen not be this informative would make combat one hell of a chore, and indeed a bore as you would be struggling through it to just look around rooms you'd already been in, reloading your save if you didn't find anything, and then moving on to the next room when you loaded back up, saving again, and just continuing this. For this reason, the map screen and tension of the game's combat work really well together, with one backing you up and reassuring you, while the other looms in the darkness, threatening to take the last of your precious bullets. Speaking of bullets, there aren't many guns in the game really, but for such a short playtime they really don't need to be. Having a low number of collectible weapons makes for a more rewarding time finding and unlocking them. Also, Claire's campaign offers weapons that are far more unique than I originally thought they'd be. Leon starts with a quite standard pistol which reloads with magazines, whereas Claire has a revolver which has more stopping power but has to be reloaded one bullet at a time, resulting in a much higher risk but higher reward playstyle. These differences continue as Leon unlocks a flamethrower later and Claire gets a high damage single target taser gun. For one more example, Leon can unlock a shotgun early on in the game whereas Claire gets an SMG. These aren't exactly subtle differences, but instead result in a very different playstyle. With Leon, I'd find myself more confidently running around because the shotgun could immediately pulverise whichever unfortunate zombie head I found when turning a corner. Claire, however, had to stand back more with the SMG, firing more carefully, which does suit her less macho over-the-top vibe.
Hello?
Good to see you again, Claire. We've got unfinished business.
The characterization in this game isn't particularly strong, and if you're playing for character development and story, I wouldn't expect too much. It's fine and suits the B-movie style of Resident Evil, but there are no super interesting twists or characters here. Just because the story specifics are quite generic doesn't mean that there aren't some great moments though. Seeing the Spec Ops unit's fallen members in the Umbrella lab and watching a VHS tape of their mission as it goes quite wrong at times is cool. It gives some insight into just how powerful Umbrella are and what huge mess you've got wrapped up in. Claire's story with Sherry is also decent, but essentially acts as another protect the child plotline like in The Last of Us or The Walking Dead games. It provides some of the more emotional cutscenes, but these never hit me as sad really. The game's just too short for you to care about these people yet. It's a shame we don't get much time with these characters really, because the voice acting here is actually really strong, especially from Claire, who sounds genuinely upset.
Sherry? Sherry, we're gonna say goodbye to your mom. Mom, please say goodbye.
There is, however, a section where you play as Sherry, this little girl Claire is trying to save, in an orphanage where you have to solve some little puzzles and then hide from the orphanage director as he chases you through the rooms. It's short and sweet, but I love the change of tone here and a new little area to explore. This mirrors both the Ashley part in Resident Evil 4, where you play as her for a little bit and feel very vulnerable while doing so, but it also acts as counter to Ada's part in Leon's campaign, where you play as her and have to do some silly tech hacking stuff through walls. The game's length is tied heavily to replayability. As I said earlier, Leon's campaign took me about 6.5 hours, Claire's took me about 5.5, so for 2 playthroughs that's about 12 hours of gameplay. That's quite short considering the £45 price tag of the game, especially when half of that playtime is the same game areas again but with new cutscenes, weapons and enemy placements. While I did enjoy going back through the game, in fact I think I enjoyed the second playthrough more because I was less terrified and more just having fun with the mechanics and collecting items, I do think this game is just a bit too expensive. It looks great and is an example of quality over quantity, but just isn't standout enough for me to love it. The bosses are poor, we'll get into those next, the enemy variety is limited and the story is quite generic. So let's get on to the actual boss fights in Resident Evil 2 Remake. They're pretty boring. There's a huge mutated scientist that turns up 3 times for you to fight. Once in the sewers, the first area after the police station, then again at the end of the sewers, and then a final time in the lab, the game's last area. The first encounter in the sewers was a joke on my second playthrough. I literally just walked this same circle over and over again, turning and shooting him occasionally and then repeating this for a few minutes until he fell off the ledge. The second fight is awful and isn't even a fight really, but a simple puzzle of sorts that involves you and G, which is his name, on a tiny little platform. You have to press a button to move the giant box the crane is holding away, and then wait for it to move. You have to then lock G in place by shooting his eye, before jamming the button a second time, calling the crane back and hitting him with it. This doesn't kill him though, you have to press the button again, wait for the crane to move him over to where he needs to be to get hit, shoot his eye again, run back, press the button, and wait for it to hit him. This second time he actually gets hit down into another abyss, and he's gone for the second time. The final fight is a bit more of a substantial combat encounter in a large-ish arena, but guess what you do to kill him this time? You shoot him loads in the different eyes all over his body, dodge his attacks if you can, which is quite hard with some of his attacks. Just shoot his eye loads, yep, you get the point. He dies after a bit and you leave the lab. These boss fights are really underwhelming and don't come close to the variety of bosses found in other Resident Evil games I've played, 4 being a standout for me with every boss being quite unique. The best boss in Resident Evil 2 Remake isn't even a boss fight, it's just Tyrant or Mr. X, whichever you prefer to call him. He wanders the police station even when he's not chasing you. You'll hear him stomping around in the rooms above you or in the hallways next to you, for example, and this means you have to quickly assemble plans in your head on the fly, which is great. So if he's coming from that room in front of me, I have to either hide in here or run away from him, but wait, did I clear all the zombies out from the room behind me? Because if not, I'll have to be fighting them as I'm running from Tyrant, which will be absolute hell. Wait, there are no hiding spaces in here, it's a big open room, so I guess I'll have to get some accurate shots into his head to stun him when he enters and then run past and escape that way. It's an example of a plan you might make on the fly when running away from Tyrant. And this is really the best part of the game, better than any of the bosses. This is great horror gameplay because it requires fast thinking, a calm execution of your plan, and results in some extremely tense moments. It's a shame Tyrant is the best thing about RE2 and he features most prominently in the first area and isn't surpassed in greatness later. Basic enemies are a lot easier to go through but are much better than the bosses. The standard zombies really can cause hassle in this game, especially if you're running low on ammo and want to save some. They're hard to run around and will lunge surprisingly fast at you if you get even slightly close. They also take a surprising amount of headshots to kill with any basic gun. Exceptions like the shotgun absolutely ruin them with one shell at point blank range though. And they get up after going down a lot of the time too, so you don't often know if they're dead as opposed to just having a quick nap. Lickers are truly terrifying on first encounter. Sneaking past them as hinted at by a note early on is always horrible and made me visibly tense up when doing so, only for my body to release when entering the next room. The game has a hint that says something like, "Lickers are a formidable foe, don't be ashamed of running if you don't have the firepower to take them down," on the loading screen, and after reading this, I thought they would take like 100 shots from the SMG or so. Turns out Claire's grenade launcher would often kill them in one hit, and seeing as I often had about 10 grenades for this thing, and there were only probably about 8 Lickers in the campaign, well, you do the math, this grenade launcher was OP. I will briefly say there are other game modes in this game which see you take on a character who appeared briefly in the story and play as those in a section that retreads some of the game's levels, but with a twist on gameplay. You have to move through these areas, the orphanage being the one I tried, killing certain zombies with backpacks on who drop keys to move you onto the next area where there'll be loads of enemies and another backpack zombie who'll drop your next necessary key. I only got to the second key in this mode and died to the biggest horde of zombies I'd ever seen in the game. I had no drive to play this again and found the whole thing way too stressful to bother with. Yes, I'm a pansy. For people who love a challenge though, you may love these additions to the game.
As long as we stick together, we'll be fine. Come on.
Hey, you guys can adopt me.
Adopt you.
We can get a puppy
Puppy.
and a parrot.
Parrot. Great.
I always wanted pets, but my mom said they're too messy.
Next up on this boring Wednesday is a song to get your blood pumping.
So, are you guys like boyfriend and girlfriend?
No, we're just... well, we actually just met last night.
Yeah. That would have been one hell of a first date, though.
Yeah,